Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson, and thank you so much for joining us. Well, the primary election in Detroit is over, and we now know who the two candidates are. Mayor Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council, and Solomon Kinloch, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, are the two highest vote getters who are going to duke it out in the fall election to become the next mayor of Detroit. Between Mayor Sheffield and Solomon Kinloch, who will become Detroit's next mayor? Well, I have Sam Riddle, the Dean of Political Consulting in Detroit, to give me some answers. And of course, to discuss what is at stake in this crucial, closely followed mayoral election in Detroit. I'm Bankole Thompson, and thank you so much. And we're just getting started with this week's edition of Bankole's Nation. Let's bring in Sam Riddle, the Dean of Political Consulting here in the city of Detroit. This week's Tuesday's primary election result revealed Mayor Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council, and Solomon Kinloch, the Reverend Solomon Kinloch, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, are going to duke it out in the November general election to, of course, to decide who is going to be the next mayor of the city of Detroit. Sam, thank you for being here.
Nice being here with you, Bankole Thompson. I mean, it's always great when you're doing a show and educating us and also opinionating a little bit. Great to be here.
No question. Sam, I want to begin looking at the numbers from Tuesday's primary. Mayor Sheffield clinched close to 50%. Reverend Kinloch, 17%, a political newcomer. He entered the race late and started at the bottom of the polls. Were you surprised in a field of 9 candidates?
Well, first of all, let's understand that one of those candidates, a former state rep and a Detroit councilman, Fred Durhal, has held office. Solomon Kinloch has never held an elective office, never ran for anything. I'm surprised that Solomon Kinloch made it through the primary and is one of the 2 finalists for the position of mayor of Detroit. I believe that's quite an accomplishment, given that when Solomon Kinloch first announced, his standing in the polls was negligible.
Yeah. And I think that's what several people have been saying, that to have someone who started from the bottom and never ran for political office. You had Police Chief James Craig, former Police Chief James Craig. You have Fred Durhal. You have Chantel Jenkins, former president of the City Council, known political entities, and for him to rise to number 2, shows the political prowess or the promise that it has.
Oh, lots of promise. As a matter of fact, when you really look at it, and you understand Solomon Kinloch's background, raised amidst abject poverty in one of the toughest cities in America, Detroit. When you look at his family background, his mother coming out of the Deep South, again, had to scuffle just to make ends meet. I believe she may have even been a sharecropper or something along that line. I'll have to look that back.
Dillon County, South Carolina, yeah.
Yes. I mean, when you look at this guy's background, Solomon Kinloch, you see really an American success story, overcoming all odds to pastor one of the largest and most productive churches in America. And he makes it a point to give back to the community, not in a symbolic way, not for a cheap headline, because he honestly feels it's the right thing to do. I've observed this. Now, I'm not a member of the church. Matter of fact, I'm one that needs a lot of prayer himself, that being me. But I can tell you one thing about the Solomon Kinloch I've met and participated in forums over the years with. This is one of the most gifted intellectually guys that we could have willing to take on the tough job of being mayor of Detroit. It's a tough job, thankless position. And I believe that if he keeps coming at that position of mayor, the current numbers will mean nothing as he starts to build a base and create what I refer to as a drumbeat. The turnout in that election was something like 16 or maybe
16%.
17%.
16%, yeah.
And when you look at that, that means that 84% of the eligible voters in Detroit did not vote. What that tells me is that they felt there was nothing to vote for. People consciously do not vote in Detroit. It's not apathy. It's a conscious decision people make because of the lack of leadership that addresses the issues of a city, Detroit, that is mired 40% of them at least in abject poverty. And the number goes up much higher when we look at the school age children. When we look at the households headed by single women. I mean, Detroit is indeed, as you've often said, and you've lectured on this subject worldwide, Detroit is a tale of two cities. And you can't keep delivering for the well off and not delivering for majority Black Detroit. And the fear that most have right now in the corporate world is that what happens? What would happen if Solomon Kinloch should get elected? It would be a Detroit good news story because majority Black Detroit has been neglected too long, too
Yeah.
long.
And let me go right into it then, because with his opponent, Mary Sheffield, who has been at the table for so long, has been president of the city council, has served for almost 12 years on the city council and so forth. She's been at the table. And now that you have a two-way race between her and Reverend Solomon Kinloch, Mary Sheffield has a record to defend.
Well, absolutely. You know, Mary Sheffield, let's be clear, has been in office for 12 years, going on 12 years. And what I find absolutely amusing is when this president of Detroit City Council touts her vast experience. But what Mary Sheffield brings to the table is experience in the legislative branch of Detroit City Council. Mary Sheffield brings experience at being a rubber stamp for the executive branch of government. We have not seen that many creative legislative notions, even let alone ordinances, let alone even the type of action that could benefit majority Black Detroit. We haven't seen that radiate from the office of City Council President Mary Sheffield. We don't have a strong community benefits agreement, but Detroit has been willing to dole out barrels of corporate welfare to the Eliches, to Dan Gilbert, and to those that take the wealth out of Detroit and return so little of it. And Mary Sheffield, if she were going to exercise real leadership in terms of majority Detroit, we would have already seen that. Instead, what we have seen in the Sheffield playbook, quite frankly, is rubber stamp after rubber stamp after rubber stamp. And the rubber stamping is touted as experience. Experience at what? More rubber stamping? Detroit deserves better.
So let me ask you, and I highlighted this in my Detroit News column in terms of that came out this week on the primary race, and that is, I've noticed that Mary Sheffield has kind of avoided. She's been with Duggan at the table, but she's avoided criticizing the mayor or criticizing what this recovery has not done for a lot of people.
Well, let's face it. Mayor Duggan has been, and let me be clear, Mayor Duggan has been a good news story for much of downtown and midtown for Detroit. They have made some token efforts to throw some bones toward some of the small to mid-sized businesses on the east and west side, but not enough to make a significant difference in the lives of majority Black Detroit. Let's be clear. We can measure outcomes. We can go right down the street here from where I live in Lafayette Park A block over are the Martin Luther King Jr. estates. Again, one of the most poverty-ridden, violent areas in the nation, and of course in Detroit. And there's not been a great deal of difference that has improved the lives of people that live in Martin Luther King Jr. estates. And the crime alone. Let's talk about crime a minute.
Right, let's
You
go.
know,
Go ahead.
the mayor and $750,000 a year activists. That there's a whole layer of activists that have received $750,000 to drive down crime in Detroit. Maybe they're doing that, but what we're seeing in the last couple of months is an increase in crime. And then what they do is they trot out data and statistics to tell us everything is okay. Crime is going down. But believe me when I tell you that majority Detroit lives in a constant state of fear. Fear causes stress. Stress shortens the lifespan of an already too short lifespan of people of African descent, Black folks in Detroit, brown folks in Detroit. Uh, we can measure the effectiveness of the crime fighting action by the funeral procession, by the candlelight vigil. And then what they do is they exercise a form of what I refer to as bullhorn leadership. Whomever has the freshest battery and the biggest bullhorn, that becomes the leader of the moment. And I'm telling you that Detroit deserves much more than bullhorn leadership. And when I talk about the 750,000, the mayor has distributed, I believe it may have been ARPA funds, to a number of community groups, $750,000 to fight crime. They've done some admirable efforts in terms of the symbolic effort. They've got their patrols and whatnot. They've learned how to generate data to say, look at us. We're effectively fighting crime. There's not one person in Detroit that feels safe as a result of those $750,000 doled out to favorite community activist groups. Now, it's their money. It's our money. It's Detroit money.
Right.
If you can get it and deliver, fine. But be sure to deliver and don't try to bully people into saying that this is the activist group that should be functioning in Detroit. The other day, I saw a gentleman insulted that has died 3 times. A legend in the streets for fighting crime. Malik Shabazz was told by a young activist that he ought to take a class in being an activist. This is the guy, Malik Shabazz, who pioneered of the New Black Panther Party, who pioneered many of the techniques used to fight street crime in Detroit 30, 40 years ago. And here's a young whippersnapper telling Malik Shabazz, you need to take a course in being an activist, a $750,000 a year activist. Give me a break. Get the hell out of here with that crap.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Sam Riddle. All right, we're speaking with the Dean of Political Consulting here in Detroit, Sam Riddle, JD from the University of Michigan Law School, talking about the latest, of course, in the Tuesday's primary election. Mary Sheffield, president of the Detroit City Council, and Reverend Solomon Kinloch, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, are going to go head at it in the general election for Detroiters to find out who will become the next mayor. Sam, now that we have a two-way race, I think there's an opportunity here for voters across the city of Detroit to look at these two candidates up close and decide on their strengths and weaknesses here, their stance on the issues, as well as their position on what their platforms look like. So, and I say that with this caveat here, and that is, during the primary election, I noticed, and I did a podcast on this, Reverend Kinloch came under the most intense scrutiny. None of the other 8 candidates in that race were scrutinized by the media. He came under heavy media scrutiny. Mary Sheffield was not scrutinized. Fred Duhall, no other candidate in that race was scrutinized. Does this two-way race now present an opportunity for these candidates to be looked at up close and to go through the rigors of the campaign?
Well,
Spotlight.
let's be real about something, okay? the establishment, corporate Detroit, fears Solomon Kinloch because Solomon Kinloch is independent, free, and he's not anyone's Negro. And that presents a problem to those that want to see things proceed as they've proceeded under the last 3 terms of Mike Duggan. And you look at it, and what they fear most is a Detroit that should Solomon Kinloch win, he is going to certainly take on poverty. Certainly Kinloch is going to take on schools that don't work. Still, 90% of our children in Detroit schools can't read, write, or do math at grade level. That's a damn shame. Where has Mary Sheffield been? She says, for 12 years, I've been on the front line. On what front line? How big was your rubber stamp, Mary Sheffield? This is hardball. This is a situation where you can't bluff about your accomplishments because you've been in office. We can measure what Sheffield has done or not done. My biggest fear is that those around Solomon Kinloch may continue to half step. There are a lot of opportunities in the next 2.5 to 3 months for Kinloch to demonstrate his leadership by raising the issues that impact majority Detroit. I keep talking about that because there are thousands of single mothers in Detroit. If you showed them how your leadership, Solomon Kinloch, would rattle the cages of corporate Detroit and result in mothers receiving the daycare they need, the schools that they need, the housing that is habitable. I mean, Detroit has been getting away with sham housing, thanks to the leadership of Detroit City Councilwoman Mary Waters, who, by the way, garnered more votes than anyone running for elective office, including all the mayors.
I
Mary
saw
Waters
that in
is
the
the one.
result. Mary Waters, Councilmember Waters got more votes than Mary Sheffield. She got 36,000 votes.
Oh, she got more. She got more than that. But the point I'm making is that Mary Waters, through leadership, born in the streets, delivered in the sense that we now have a tenant rights commission that has teeth in it because of the tenant rights ordinance that will allow tenants to place their dollars in escrow when the air conditioning doesn't work, when the elevators don't work,
Now,
when the heat
I
doesn't work.
I wrote a column about the Tenant Rights Commission, which I thought was very important. But one would think that Mary Sheffield, as president of City Council, will spearhead those bold initiatives.
She should have. She should have. There are other proposals that were brought forth that would have resulted in a good community benefits agreement so that we could share in the profits derived from those big corporate tax breaks and tax abatements that have been conferred upon the likes of the Eliches and Dan Gilbert. I mean, we could do a lot more. I'm just using those two because they're the most
Right,
noticeable
more
names.
visible.
We
Right.
have some genuine slumlords that are using cryptocurrency to evade identity so that no one will know who owns the property that is so uninhabitable that they're still being allowed to rent. Uh, Detroit right now is simply a dangerous city for people that have to live in the killing field of Detroit. I was just down the street here on St. Albans, not even a good 5-minute walk from here, with Linda Jones, a retired Detroit city fireman whose son was gunned down, killed a couple of years ago, several years ago. Still, no one brought to justice. With him was a friend who was also gunned down and killed right there at King Estates. I keep mentioning King Estates because that area has become a field of violence, a killing field. And how many more memorials, little crosses, with flowers do we have to place in areas like that? I mean, it's an insult. The crime that still runs rampant in Detroit, and they try to cover it up with glorious numbers. Statistics don't make Detroiters feel safe.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought it up because I wanted to go back to those two little kids who were found dead in their mother's vehicle in a downtown Detroit
Right
casino. They
here,
were homeless. That's right.
where I live.
Right, right. And I noticed that the city was reactionary to that. And it happened at a time when we have a mayor's race. We have the president of the city council, Sheffield, running as a front runner. And the Mayor Duggan did his press conference, talked about what they're going to do and all of that stuff. But one would expect that perhaps the council president would have taken a bold initiative when that happened to reorder perhaps the entire apparatus of city government and talk about what needs to happen moving forward and bring some tangibles to the council table to ensure that no other child ends up dying in a vehicle in the winter.
But understand this: there was a number that could have been used, and it was used, but there wasn't an adequate response. At the Kamaya Davis Family Resource Center, founded by, again, Councilwoman at Large Mary Waters. Kamaya Davis was an 11-month-old black baby girl in Detroit that stepped in a hole in the floor, fell through it, and drowned in backed up sewage water loaded with feces. What a horrible way to die. Mary Waters took that issue, Bankole Thompson, and what she did was she created the Kamaya Davis Family Resource Center, one-stop center, where if a mother is found in a situation where she has nowhere else to go, she won't have to just stay anywhere, least of all in a house with a hole in the floor where the basement has backed up sewage and her child, 11-month-old, drowned in that basement. And in that instance, poverty was criminalized when the prosecutor moved to prosecute the mother of Kamaya Davis. And those two youngsters who live, again, about a 7-minute walk from where I'm speaking right now in the parking lot of the Greektown Casino, and they may have died to carbon monoxide poison in addition to having been an horribly cold situation with no heat or
Right.
anywhere to go.
Yeah.
The mayor, now this is to his credit, did move immediately with an 8-step program after the fact to make sure that the phones are being answered, and when families find themselves in that situation, that they can get immediate shelter. I've seen that work out of Councilwoman at Large Mary Waters' office, but again, real leadership. If you're the Detroit City Council president, it should have been you, Mary Sheffield, not Mary Waters, that did that. It just becomes kind of horrible watching rubber stamp politics play out here in Detroit, and then when it's election time, you talk about 12 years of being on the front lines. We can measure outcomes, and the outcomes in terms of the leadership of Mary Sheffield are suspect, even though she makes great commercials. You can run $1 million ad campaign and you look great on TV, but what have you done that's made a difference in the lives of single mothers in Detroit? What have you done that's made a difference in the lives of Detroit school children, truant? Many of them don't even go to class because they don't have a home to go to. That's an ugly reality in Detroit. Uh,
Yeah.
I can go on and on. It's not
No,
just
no,
bleak.
I think you're
There's
laying
good
out.
news in Detroit too. There is good news in Detroit, and some
Yeah.
of it has been done under the leadership of Mike Duggan. But I got to tell you, the way a checks and balances system works, Mary Sheffield, is the legislative branch is supposed to serve as a check and balance on the executive branch. You can't be rubber stamping everything the executive branch wants. And the only power that the legislative Detroit City Council has is during budget time. But when budget rolls around, it's basically a dog and pony show by the executive branch, the mayor's office, and they nod and vote in favor more often than not. Even though, again, under the leadership of Mary Waters, they have been putting the Detroit Land Bank in check.
An important issue which needs to come up in this race. But I'm just, as you're laying out these issues, I'm wondering though, do you feel that voters are taking this information in to look at both Solomon Kinloch and Mary Sheffield and said, okay, I know who I'm going to go with. I know who is, blowing smoke and who's not blowing smoke. I know who's throwing dust in our ear, in our eyes. I know who's not,
I don't see any behavior on the part of the Kinloch camp that is going to close the gap right now, today, between Sheffield and Kinloch. The Kinloch campaign has to create a drumbeat. Detroit must be made angry by the intolerable conditions that they've taken. I mean, Detroit, majority of Detroit, black folks have been played by white folks that are lining their pockets and jackleg, handkerchief-head Negro enablers of the status quo that look the other way as our people are suffering intolerable living conditions in Detroit. To get out the type of vote that will carry Solomon Kinloch to victory, we're going to have some no-bluff, hard language spoken on the streets of Detroit that make people angry enough to get up and go vote. Right now, they'll just roll another big fat one, take a sip, and to hell with it. They have no expectations. We must create expectations of delivering from the mayor's office, the new mayor's office for majority Detroit. Right now, that doesn't exist because some of those folks running these campaigns are half-stepping. Detroit needs more than half-stepping from those that would lead. That includes you too, Solomon Kinloch, as well as Mayor Sheffield. We don't have a lot of expectations of Sheffield. She's going to be business as usual along the line of what Mayor Duggan has done, and that suits the billionaire class real fine.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with the Dean of Political Consulting here in Detroit, Sam Riddle. All right, we're speaking with Sam Riddle, the Dean of Political Consulting in the city of Detroit. Sam, there's a lot, and I want to talk about, this is, of course, my favorite, the pork chop industry.
Whoa!
You don't have to bring that in, Sam. And I mentioned it in my podcast last week. The pork chop industry, and there are folk in this political campaign who want the status quo to prevail, and they prefer that the status quo prevails, and because they get their own sidecar, they're getting their own piece on the side, and so forth, and so you have all these competing interests that ignores the reality of poverty, in the King estates, that ignores all of the ugly realities of a Kamaya Davis's situation, the ugly realities of the Corey kids who were found dead in their mother's vehicle in a parking lot in the downtown Detroit casino. And so you have all these competing interests that really have no bearing in advancing life in the city of Detroit, but these folk are just in there for their own interest.
Pork chops. They're having pork chops delivered to them. The gatekeepers are, and that's
right.
Damn,
the gatekeeper.
That's a damn shame. But let me just say this: one other problem we have is with the UAW, which endorsed Solomon Kinloch, saying that they were going to be on the battlefield against the billionaire class. And I say unequivocally that workers deserved a lot more than they've gotten from that UAW. They make great PR headlines, but we need the UAW to really hit these streets and help create that drumbeat. They have the worker power to do that. And Sean Fain, other than doing press conferences, standing with Solomon Kinloch, needs to get his ass out on the streets and do something. In the name of the UAW, something, damn it. I mean, the UAW took a big hit with the difference in the vote outcome between Mary Sheffield and Solomon Kinloch. My mother died, over 50-year member of the UAW in retirement. She deserves better in death than what we're getting from this current UAW. I believe the leadership is there, but they've gotten a little bourgeoisie in their approach to the streets of Detroit too.
You indicated that the UAW owes no explanation or nothing whatsoever to Sheffield campaign when they endorsed Solomon Kinloch for mayor. You said that. You said they don't owe, because I think
no, they don't owe.
Kinloch campaign talked about,
they don't owe Sheffield anything. I mean, Horace Sheffield is still administering CPR to his father, a genuine giant in the labor movement, who made his legacy. I mean, he helped Martin Luther King Jr. with money and with other support, and the Great March on Washington. But the symbolism of what the real Horace Sheffield did is lost in the shuffle of the regressive politics of Mary Sheffield's father, Horace Sheffield. Regressive policies, anti-worker policies, really, because he's still stuck on symbolism. And meantime, the real UAW, which owes the Sheffield descendants nothing, they need to get up and get in these streets and deliver for Solomon Kinloch, who is a former UAW member and worker. There's a lot going on here, and there's some internal conflict in the UAW too. But I could get into that. It's a whole nother discussion.
No, I get it. You invoked Martin Luther King Jr., and also I think one thing that has not been mentioned is that Reverend Kinloch went to the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, which is where the Reverend Dr. Bernard Lafayette, civil rights leader, the late Congressman John Lewis, civil rights leader, they went to the American Baptist Theological Seminary, and known as an institution that really was attended by many giants of the civil rights movement.
And these
were close. These were the people who were in Martin Luther King's inner circle.
And that needs to be, that legacy of Bernard Lafayette, that legacy needs to be discussed. The legacy, of course, of John Lewis. And we need some good trouble being made here in Detroit. And Solomon Kinloch is almost modest, humble to a fault, because that background alone stamps him as true leadership material that could really follow in the steps of the original Horace Sheffield, not the knockoff version of his son.
Okay. Sam Riddle, you see why he's the Dean of Political Consulting here. We could go on and on, but thank you so much for being on this week's edition of our podcast.
Okay, and thank you.
Thank you.
I love everybody. Love you, Mike Duggan. Okay.
I will have you back to make a prediction on the race, but it's too early. We'll have you back. Thank you.
No, we got to get in these streets and create that drum beat. Love you too, Bankole Thompson.
Okay, thank you, Sam.